In 2023 presidential election, 4 men shared 60.9% of Nigerian vote. I mean 60.9%. And who are these men I'm talking about? You already know them, and that is Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, Rabi Kwankwaso, and Rotimi Amechi. The four of them, they outpolled President Bola Ahmed Tinubu by nearly 25 percentage points. And now, for the first time, all these 4 men are inside the same political party, the ADC. And trust me, these 4 political icons, they have the numbers, they have the names, they even have a coalition that everyone is saying it's impossible. And there's a problem because right now there is a single court case that is threatening to erase all of this before a single ballot is cast. Why people are asking that who is going to become the ADC's presidential candidate? That is not the question right now. There is a more dangerous question we should be asking. And that dangerous question is, what happens if the ADC doesn't legally exist by the time primary begins? You don't understand. The way it's looking like, the way the structure is going, the way the court cases is going, the way the attacks here and there is going, it's looking like there might not be primaries for ADC. But before we go for that, if you are new here, you are welcome. This channel exists for one reason, to give you the political analysis that mainstream media will not want to talk about. And if what I do make sense to you, kindly hit the like button, subscribe, and share to somebody as we continue, because this gets deeper. Let me refresh you on what actually happened and when it happened. So, if you remember, in September 2025, a Nigerian court ruled that the ADC must return to its previous executive structure, and that ruling came out of internal leadership dispute, one that most Nigerians, both in diaspora, were not paying keen attention to us at that time. And now, on the 1st of April 2026, and this is not even a joke now, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, did something. They declared that they no longer recognize the ADC's current leadership. And mind you, the chairman, INEC, is saying they don't recognize was Senator former David Mark, the former Senate president, one of Nigeria's most experienced political operators. And also, they recognized his national secretary, and that's no other person but Rauf Aregbesola. And Rauf Aregbesola was former governor of Osun State and a former minister, and a heavyweight politician in his own right. Yes, that's on period. And one will ask or wonder that, how did ADC get here? Let me explain. There's a man named Nafi Gombe. He was a former national vice chairman of ADC. He went to the Federal High Court in Abuja, and his argument was straightforward. When the previous chairman, Raf Nwosu, stepped down, he said that he, Nafi Gombe, should assume the leadership of the party under ADC's own constitution. But he said instead of that, David Mark was brought in. Gombe said that single act violated the rules, and then he filed a lawsuit. And that single lawsuit he filed then has now paralyzed an opposition coalition that represents political aspiration of many Nigerians. And on the 22nd of April 2026, 5-member panel of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, they heard the final argument in this case. They reserved judgment, but no date given. Let me tell you something. ADC right now is Nigeria's most important opposition party and its most consequential coalition ahead of the general election, if you agree with me. And the highest court in the land says, we will tell you when we are ready. That sounds somehow. Because why would a Supreme Court reserve judgment with no delivery date, this precise moment in the electoral calendar? Before we get to the Supreme Court, we need to understand exactly which institution is pulling the strings here and the why the ADC lawyers are calling this situation a constitutional crisis and not just a legal dispute. Let me tell you something. Three institutions are in direct conflict right now, and each one is giving different readings of same legal situation. Institution number one is the Federal High Court in Abuja. Justice Emeka Onwete has essentially frozen his own court. He declined to hear any further motion in the case because the Supreme Court is actively reviewing whether the Federal High Court even has jurisdiction to hear it. You understand? So his logic is very reasonable because if the apex court is deciding whether I should be handling the case at all, how can I keep handling it? So the lower court is frozen. The institution number two is the Court of Appeal. Appellate court already ruled. It said that all parties must maintain status quo, meaning the state of affairs that existed before Marx's leadership began. And it directed INEC specifically, do not do anything that will preempt the final outcome of this case. INEC used that ruling as its legal basis for suspending ADC's recognition. And institution number three is INEC itself. The commission says it's simply following the court order, and David Mark's faction says INEC has willfully misread the judgment, and they have demanded the resignation of the INEC chairperson. But my headache now is that three institutions, three different readings of the same legal situations, and every reading has a different consequence for who controls the ADC. Here is the deeper constitutional question no one is asking, and the one that even matters beyond this particular case: that can a Nigerian court intervene in the internal affairs of a political party at all? I need to know because, according to David Marks, senior advocate, he told the Supreme Court that the apex court had already answered the question in a ruling from March 2025 itself, and no court has jurisdiction over the internal affairs of a political party, and that's period. The opposing side says the lower court acted within its proper bounds, and because this is not about internal party preference and it is about whether the party's own constitution was violated, both arguments have constitutional merit, and that ambiguity is precisely the problem. Someone definitely is benefiting somewhere, and I want to ask, who is benefiting from ADC being locked in legal paralysis? The answer is not complicated. You also know the answer. Any party that does not want a unified opposition on the 2027 ballot. The ADC has directly accused the APC of deliberately fueling instability within its ranks, and I will not make that accusation on their behalf, but I will tell you this: the structural incentive is plain. You do not need a conspiracy to explain behaviors that is also rational self-interest. While the legal crisis plays out in the court, a second conflict is running simultaneously inside the coalition itself. Peter Obi and Kwankwaso have been actively consulting northern leaders around a one-time power rotation deal. The plan Obi runs in 2027, serve one term. Kwankwaso runs in 2031, and multiple sources even describe Kwankwaso as the arrowhead of the mobilization against Atiku among northern delegates. And Atiku, by contrast, is described by his own allies as deeply entrenched in the ADC's internal structure. And now, if David Mark's leadership is legally invalidated, who conducts the ADC's primaries and who controls the process? Here is something else the coverage has not explained. And reports indicate that Peter Obi and Kwankwaso were absent from the list one high level closed from the last high level closed door meeting convened specifically to review the possible outcome of the Supreme Court's judgment. And their absence is not a scheduling issue. When two men who want to be presidents keep a crisis meeting in their own party, they are managing optionality. They are keeping their hands clean of whatever outcome the court produces. And the people who are loudest about defending the ADC in public may not be the ones most invested in its current leadership surviving. And there's a third faction, a group aligned with the ADC's 2023 presidential candidate, the Dumebi Kachuku, has now emerged publicly again. And this faction is backing INEC's decision to stop dealing with both the Mark and Gombe side. Three factions, two courtrooms, one electoral commission that has suspended the party's recognition entirely. And meanwhile, INEC's 2027 electoral timetable has already begun moving. Key deadlines are approaching, and the ADC has no legally recognized leadership to meet them. And but here is what almost no one is discussing. The crisis doesn't just threaten the ADC's 2027 ticket. It threatens something far bigger, the democratic architecture that all Nigerian opposition parties depend on. ADC's legal counsel put it plainly in a letter to the Chief Justice of Nigeria. A delay of even a day, a few days, could deny millions of Nigerians their constitutional rights to freely associate and contest elections through a party of their choice. And that is not rhetoric. INEC's 2027 timetable has commenced. A party without recognized leadership cannot submit candidates, cannot conduct primaries, and cannot meet cannot meet filing deadlines. But the implications go further than the ADC. Consider what precedent is being set in this moment. If a court-induced leadership freeze can neutralize a major opposition party at the moment, it poses its most credible threat to an incumbent. That precedent is now available to any future government against any future opposition. This is not only an ADC story, like I was telling you the other time. This is a story about the conditions under which opposition politics can exist in Nigeria. The ADC crisis is a stress test of Nigeria's democratic infrastructure. And right now, that infrastructure is really failing the test. And the economic dimension is so real, and foreign capital does not flow into markets where political landscape is structurally contested. Like every week that this crisis is unresolved is a week in which Nigeria's 2027 policy debates on subsidy removal, on Naira, on security is crowded out by legal procedure. The ordinary Nigerian is paying a price for this crisis, not in court fee, in investors' confidence, in policy attention, in democratic credibility. For Nigerians watching from diaspora, from the United Kingdom, United States, from Canada, anywhere you might be in the world, I want to tell you something clearly. The question is not who leads ADC. The question is whether the institutional condition for competitive democracy in Nigeria are being systematically dismantled. At the Occupy INEC protest that was held the last time in Abuja, we saw Peter Obi stood before a crowd and said, "We members and leaders of the ADC are saying that our democracy must not be killed. We say no to one-party system." That message travels. The diaspora understand that one-party system feels like, because many of us come from countries that live through them, and the continental dimension matters too. What is happening to the ADC is not unique to Nigeria. Across West Africa, in Senegal, in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, we have watched opposition parties enter election cycles while entangled in legal and institutional disputes. That consumes their resources, their credibility, and their momentum. Whether the origin is internal or external catalyzed, the result is the same. The opposition arrives at election day weakened. The incumbent arrives strengthened. And Africa's collective interest is so clear. Competitive democracy produces better governance. Countries where opposition is functional, where elections are genuinely contested, produce better outcomes for their citizens. The ADC crisis is not a Nigerian problem, it is an African pattern. And where commentators are most wrong is here. They are covering this as a personality conflict. Mark versus Gombe, Obi versus Atiku, Kwankwaso versus everyone. The personalities they are secondary. The institutional question: does Nigeria have a legal framework that can protect legitimate opposition structure from being neutralized through litigation? That question will outlast every single person in the story. Regardless of tribe, region, or party, every Nigerian citizen has an interest in the same question. Can this country's democratic system produce a genuinely competitive election in 2027? The ADC crisis is the most visible test of that question right now. And so here is a question I want you to carry away from this video. Not who wins the ADC ticket, but this. Why is it this easy to use legal process to freeze a political party? The Supreme Court's judgment will come. When it does, I will be back here until full breakdown. Until then, watch the signals, watch the institution, and watch who says nothing. And if this analysis gave you clarity, share it with one person who needs to understand what is really happening in Nigeria. And don't forget to please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.